if you like these ideas, you want to take them back to management. It gives you some nice math behind it. So Wharton did a study a few years ago on line of sight, and they found that when they talked with executives, one of the biggest comments, most consistent comments they heard from business executives was that the reason that their companies could not execute on their strategy was lack of employee buy-in. And that's, that shouldn't be a surprise to us in HR, right? That we've got to engage our people in order to get them to stay focused on the mission. So at least the top executives in this particular survey recognize that. The other thing is that they found that when we connected those drivers, when we got the employees bought in, all of a sudden the company achieved better goals. Now this isn't a topic necessarily about employee engagement because that can mean a whole lot of different things, but we are going to touch on that. I mean, line of sight is in part creating an engagement type culture, so we're going to look at that. Okay? And then finally, it shouldn't be a surprise, if we get people connected to our mission and our vision and our strategy, we start to see retention go up. We start to see their willingness to refer other employees in go up. Absenteeism drops, all kinds of good stuff starts happening because folks are focused on the same things that the business is focused on. Okay? So, and then for those of you who may be with a publicly held company, we start to see higher shareholder returns in the public sector. So there's a lot of good stuff in here if we can get our people bought in and focused on the strategy the same way we as management people are. All right, so what is line of sight? Let's start off with the definition, right? It's merely the employee's perception that what they do contributes to where the organization is going. So if I had to ask you, if you walked out on your shop floor, you walked out into the office, and you asked your average employee, hey, did what you do today make a difference for where the company's strategy is going? How many of you would say that your average employee would say, yeah? One kind of a half, maybe, a couple, okay? Why not? Let me ask that, why not? They don't see it?
Yeah, they don't
okay.
see the connection.
Okay.
I don't think we ask it that way.
Okay, how do you ask it?
We have standard performance appraisals.
Okay.
It's all behavior based. I don't know if we tie it into company results as much.
Okay, all right, yeah.
And sometimes I think the company strategy just isn't communicated.
We're going to talk about that one. That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
How many of you, let's talk about that for a second. How many of you know your company strategy? Can articulate it? Interesting. So maybe half of you. Okay. All right, that's good. So that's a start, right? How many of you know that your company has a strategy because the executives have all disappeared to some resort somewhere and they came back with one, but you don't know what it is? A couple of you, yeah, okay, that happens too, right? So we'll look at that. That's another challenge, right? That's another topic for another workshop sometime. But we're going to look at, if we know the strategy, how do we communicate it out to the employee in terms that they understand, okay? So there's really two types of line of sight that we can create. Okay, the first one is a short line of sight. Think about this. Let's say I'm a machine where I'm a production employee on a line that's making widgets, and you tell me that at the end of the day I had to make 100 widgets. That's a short line of sight. At the end of the day, I know if I've made my 100 widgets or not, right? So you can reward me on that. You can incent me on that. And you can also talk to me in terms of, well, Ed, if you make your 100 widgets today, that means that we can ship them on time and our customers are happy. It's sort of easy for us to communicate out those terms, okay? The longer line of sight is the more challenging one, but it's also the more important one, because that longer line of sight deals with things like, well, this year we want to grow our market share to 80%. What does that mean to the average employee? The average employee thinks, oh, well, that means sales has to go out and do their job, right? But we all have a share in that. And so the difference is that employees love to be measured on short line of sight. Management likes, obviously, the longer line of sight. So we're going to have to learn, neither one is right or wrong. We just have to learn how do we manage both of them. That's going to be our challenge today, okay? So when we look at this, if you take a look at this graph, okay, that shorter line of sight works really well at the individual level, works great at a team level as well. But as we go up the line and we get into incorporating the entire business or whole departments, that's where the longer line of sight comes in. And if you look at the graph, what ends up happening is we get better measurement accuracy. So if all you do is measure me on making my 100 widgets today, that's short line of sight. What we may not know at the end of the day is how many of those widgets were defective. We may not know that till we ship them. The customers get them and say, well, this thing doesn't work, and they send it back, right? And that could be 2 or 3 months down the line. And so that's where we need to marry that short line of sight to the longer line of sight and create a blend for our employees, and we're going to look at that today. The interesting thing is, obviously, as management folks, we like that longer line of sight. We want 3, 6, 9 months, 18 months out perhaps, because we can get some real nice trends going on with employee performance at that point. So we'll look at how we marry those two together. Okay, so a couple of initial thoughts here. We know employees like the short, we know management likes the longer one, and so when we think about how we're going to design this line of sight communication, we've got to be able to communicate out both. So let me toss this one out. How many of you, if you're top executive or top person at your, if you're in a really large organization, the top person at your facility is gone for the day, gone for the week, how much havoc does that cause? None, right? That's usually what I get, see ya. We'll get stuff done in your absence, okay? Now I want you to think about your most entry-level employee. When that person's gone for the day, what happens? Do you run around scrambling? Who's going to get the work done? What's going to happen? Everyone's up in arms, right? What an interesting dynamic. Now, I don't say, I don't illustrate that to say we don't need our top executives, right? But oftentimes, when I've done this session, I had someone raise their hand and say, Ed, I struggle with what you're saying because I think about an administrative assistant. And, I don't see what her job is, and she did say her, I'm not being sexist, okay, this is coming from an attendee. She says, I don't see what her, she doesn't really have line of sight, she just shows up and enters data all day. Like, oh, well, let's talk about that, right? Okay, what happens if the data she enters is wrong? It's incorrect. It's not done timely. It's not this, it's not that. Clearly, what she's doing on a daily basis matters. If you can isolate a job in your organization that on a daily basis you say, boy, you know what? I don't think that what that person does contributes to the bottom line. What would you do with that job? Get rid of it. Thank you. Get rid of it, right? You don't need that job, okay? And so when we think about this, that's one of the things we have to think about. This is not a top management thing. This is not an entry-level employee thing either. This is an organization thing that we're going to talk about today. Okay, so think about this. Here's some other interesting dynamics. It shouldn't be a surprise that folks that have been with us longer tend to have higher lines of sight, right? They've been through all the business cycles. They understand what's going on. They've been there, done that, seen that, right? But take a look at a couple of these other ones. Think about your average entry-level employee. They're probably some of the folks that have the shortest tenure with your organization. A lot of times those entry-level jobs are the ones that we end up having some churn with. They may not be the most sexy jobs that we have or whatever. These folks often have the greatest impact on our bottom line. So I see a couple of you nodding. Can you give me your example?
Well, I work for a drug and alcohol treatment center.
Okay.
So our lowest level employees are behavioral health techs that are
Okay.
with our clients.
Face to face, right?
24/7.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
And they are the ones who impact their experience in treatment.
Sure. All of you know UPS, right? So when you think of UPS, what first comes to mind?
Drivers.
Drivers, right? Brown uniforms, drivers, okay? Do you guys understand that those drivers do not control whether you get your package on time or not? I mean, they only deliver what's on their trucks, right? The person that controls whether you get your package on time or not is some hungover college kid working at 3 o'clock in the morning. Literally, okay? Because I was one of those hungover college kids, okay? And so, if I put your box on the wrong truck, you're not getting it today, okay? And so we think about that. Those are people, they're frontline people. They're never going to see you as the customer. They work, in the wee hours when we're all asleep for the most part, right? But they have the greatest impact on whether customers get their packages on time and whether those packages are in fact handled properly and not demolished, okay? Because once they get to the truck, the driver's not demolishing your package. If it shows up and it's demolished, it happened during the processing, okay? And so we have to think really hard about our frontline employees in this process. So I don't want you to think, as we're going on, for the next hour here, about, oh, these higher level jobs. I want you to think lower level, because those are sometimes the most forgotten folks when it comes to the impact on the business, okay? And so the other interesting thing is that even people that have been with us for a length of time, if they've job hopped around the organization, maybe you've got a system where you plop someone in sales and you plop them in HR, and you move around to, quote, round them out. Studies seem to indicate that, okay, that's great to get a little bit of experience, but that does not equate to someone understanding how each function contributes to the strategic organization or the strategic goals of the organization. And the reason for that is they're in there to learn a couple little things and then they move on. They don't get to have that long time tenure where they really get to absorb and see the business cycles, okay? So what we find is people that have been in their job for longer periods of time tend to start to really make the connections in there. Okay, so no surprise, you're part-time, you're temporary work staff. How many of you have not only part-time and temporary work staffs, but you would say that those people have the most contact and the most impact on your customer base? Only a handful. Okay, all right. Sometimes, again, those are the forgotten people. Think about going to the mall and you're shopping at your favorite store. Chances are it's a part-time person helping you, right? And yet maybe you continue to go back to that store because you like that sales rep. You like it when they're on duty, you like their interactions, how they fit you with clothing or makeup or whatever it happens to be you're shopping for, right? And so there again, there's that part-time person in retail who can literally make or break that store's or that department's finances. Okay, so I'm a big fan of this World at Work model. World at Work it used to be the American Compensation Association. But this picture really illustrates how everything flows out of business strategy. And so we're not going to go through the whole model, but I want you to look right here at business strategy, okay? This model reads left to right. Everything starts with business strategy. So we've already talked about the fact that some of us aren't quite sure about our business strategy, but there are three main types of business strategy, okay? First is product or service excellence. So a company that focuses on product or service excellence, it's all about that. It's all about the service being delivered, the product they're putting out, and they drive their revenues based on that. Any companies come to mind? Starbucks, right? You can get coffee anywhere. People want a Starbucks because they perceive it to be a better product, whether it is or not. Okay? Could be up for debate, but that's their thing. Any others come to mind? Product or service excellence?
Chick-fil-A.
Never heard that one before, but do tell.
Chick-fil-A has excellent customer service.
Okay?
And people appreciate that.
Okay?
And you can get fast food anywhere.
This is true. Hold that thought, though. I want to come back to that. I'm not saying it's wrong for this one, but let's talk about that in terms of another strategy, too. Any other product or service excellence?
Disney.
Thank you. We're in the home of Disney, right? Okay? I was amazed, at just the sheer numbers of people. Of course, we've been down here with our family always in the summertime, but kids are back to school, and yet you see families everywhere, right? At least back home, the kids are back to school. And I'm thinking, man, this place, obviously, it owns Central Florida, right? Why? Because they've created this brand. And it also plays into, and we'll talk about this next strategy, customer intimacy. Okay, some people would argue that's where Starbucks is, okay? They're loyal to Starbucks. And that could be where Chick-fil-A is going, customer intimacy, okay? Any other ones come to mind, other organizations come to mind that are all about that? They will drive their business through the customer. And if they take care of the customer, they can charge whatever they want.
Nordstrom.
Thank you, I just heard one.
Nordstrom.
Okay, Nordstrom's a good one. Apple, right? Apple can also fall under product or service leadership because they're always coming out with the next whiz-bang thing that we all want, right? Zappos I've heard before, right? Okay? So you're willing to pay more because of your customer experience. So product and service leadership, it's I'm willing to pay more because it's a high-quality service or a high-quality product. With customer intimacy, you're willing to pay more because of the experience. Okay? Third type of business strategy is operational excellence. These types of companies make their money off of how they deliver their products or services. Okay? Any thoughts on that one? Amazon, good one. Now, come on. I just said I was a UPS guy. You're throwing out FedEx at me. I know they're down the hall. Yes, UPS and FedEx. And there's one other one. There's a place that we all shop and we never want to admit it. Walmart, right? Okay? We're all Walmartians sometime or other, okay? And so when we shop at Walmart, Walmart drives their prices two ways. One, they beat their vendors over the head, right? But two, they have a logistics network built by former UPS and FedEx logistical engineers, okay? And so that's how they can get product out so cheaply. So, you know, when you think about those terms, right, those three types of strategy, your business probably falls into one of them. Maybe you're straddling one or two, and that's pretty normal, okay? But if we don't know at least the basic one, and I guarantee you your executives know, okay, where they're headed. But if we don't know, how are we going to communicate it out, right? Because everything else we do flows from that. Our culture starts to develop from that. Our HR strategy comes from that. Then we get into rewards, recognition. I mean, everything the rest of the way as we read right across the diagram, okay? Now, we're talking about line of sight today. Line of sight occurs right here, right at that double arrow. Because notice how the rest of the diagram flows. But all of a sudden, we have a break here, okay? If we don't make that connection where that double arrow is, we fail. Because everything up till there is built. But we still don't get the results if we don't connect all those dots. And that area, that little gap right there, that's the line of sight area we're focusing on today. Okay? All right, moving on. So developing line of sight is I'll say in quotes, a simple four-step process. Okay? I don't think I'm going to reveal this stuff that you're going to say, oh my gosh, I would have never thought of that. The devil's in the details, right? How we do it, how we structure it. Okay? So first step here, what we just talked about. Employee has to understand the business strategy. Now, when I say understand it, I want you to think about it in terms that the employee can understand based on their role within the organization. Okay? So, you know, that kid on the docks at UPS doesn't necessarily need to understand how a driver goes about his or her day. What that person has to understand is, what happens if I put a box on the wrong truck? Or I put a box on the wrong spot on the right truck? What are the implications of that? Is that part of the training? Do we talk about those types of things? That's the beginning of helping employees understand what's happening. Okay? And so when we start with training and we think about this, most companies would argue that, oh, it's all about the customer. So what would happen if you stood up in front of your employee group and said, for us, operational excellence is where it's at? Most employees are going to rebel and say, what about the customer? Well, we have to be able to help them see that by being excellent with our operations, that's where the customer benefits. So again, it becomes a communication piece, how we communicate that out, and we're going to talk about that. Okay? So we have to have a core message. What is it that we want to all get behind? And that message has to be delivered in such a way that our employees can relate to it based on their job duties. So again, let's go back and maybe management delivers this great speech and says, you know, we want to increase our revenues by $2 million this year. Okay, what does that mean to me? I'm a data processor. I'm not in sales. I never touch the customer. What does that mean? What do I have to do to help contribute to an extra $2 million in revenue? So when we roll out these things, we've got to be careful about, especially those of you maybe in larger organizations, it's so easy to type an email, hit send, boom, everyone gets the same message. The problem is, with this, not everyone hears the same message. And so if I don't understand it in terms of my job, now we've got a problem, right? And so this is the challenge for us in HR, is how do we make sure that our people get this message in the way they need to hear it based on their job duties, Okay? Second thing, the company-wide rollout thing. We got to be real careful with that. I had a client a while back. They were a German-owned company. And they had a heck of a lot of great communication going on. And I was doing some focus groups with them because they had just done an employee opinion survey and the results were horrible. And they didn't understand why. And one of the things that kept coming up in these focus groups was communication. And I didn't understand that because they had town hall meetings with the plant manager. You walked into their cafeteria, they had bulletin boards with all kinds. I mean, it was almost communication overload. And I thought perhaps that was the problem. But then finally, one of the people in one of the sessions said, Ed, let's take a walk down to the cafeteria. I want you to look at those bulletin boards. I'm like, all right, I've looked at them, but let's go. And so he said, what do you see? I'm like, well, I see all kinds of stuff on the bulletin board. Until he made me look closer. Okay? Now, the hint was that this was a German-owned company. Every financial figure was communicated in euros. Now, we laugh and go, duh, why would they do that? Okay? This is a major company. I guarantee you've got their products in your homes. This is no mom and pop run organization. Okay? And yet, that one simple thing, who's hitting the convert button on all the spreadsheets and bar graphs that are on the wall? Who's converting those financial figures when that plant manager would stand up and have her town hall meeting so she could talk in terms of dollars? I mean, that sounds so simple in hindsight, right? And yet, that was a huge problem for them because employers stand there, oh great, we're up 500,000 euros. I don't know what that means. Is that good? Is it bad? People literally did not know. And that's a problem. How do we create line of sight when people just don't even know about the figures we're talking about? And the town hall meetings were great because they pull everyone together, but you had everyone from sales to IT to people in the warehouse to the assemblers. I mean, they were all in there getting the same message. That's a challenge. So if we really want to do this well, we've got to think about how do we customize our messages based on the employee's perspective and where they're coming from. Okay? Second thing is, what does leadership have to do with all this? Okay? Does leadership walk its own talk? Does leadership see communication as the effective driver? Or are they the ones standing up there talking in terms of euros? Okay? So again, from a leadership perspective, it's easier sometimes for us to hit the send button and communicate with 500 people at once. But how many people understand that communication? How many people even read it, right? I mean, we all get inundated with email, so if that's the way we primarily communicate, what percentage of our people are just hitting delete? That's from HR. Delete. Right? Okay? So, yeah, you're nodding, right? Yeah, it happens. Okay? So, we've got to be real careful. And so, leadership and management, they have to own part of this process. This is not, as HR folks, we can lead this process. We can lead line of sight. But management has to own it. We should be in the background kind of guiding them, pushing them along. But they need to own this communication process. Okay? And so, management has to set the vision. So in terms of that strategy, that business goals and everything, they're in charge of that, but then they're also in charge of developing the communication out as to why that's happening. What are we supporting here? I'll give you another example. I was working with an organization, this was in the late 2000s, right about the time the recession was hitting. And this company made high-end kitchen and bath cabinetry. Okay, so of course, 2008-9 hits, right? What was one of the first industries that crumbled? Construction, real estate, right? So these guys were hurting. And they had great products. I mean, it was high end. I mean, the kitchens were just amazing, okay? And so I'm talking with this owner, and he's telling me all the different things they've got in place to continue to incent their people and everything. And one of the things they were struggling with was a lot of overtime. But despite all the overtime they were paying, they were late on shipments. They had wrong shipments. I mean, the indicators just, something was wrong here, okay? So the more I talked to this guy, he started talking about, and I could spend all day talking about, from an HR study, it's really kind of cool. But the one thing that really struck me was their profit sharing plan. Now, before we walked the floor, the management team had told me this was a family-run business, that we got this great profit share, here's how it all works, and it was great. It was very lucrative, okay? And they said to me that they hadn't made a profit in like 3 quarters at that point. But each quarter, they made quarterly profit-sharing payments to their employees. And I said, why? And they said, Come on, you guys know the answer.
It's an expectation.
It's an expectation. Okay? Well, what message are we sending? Gee, it's a profit share, but if we don't make profits, you'll get something. It's sending the wrong behaviors, gang, right? So then I said, okay, tell me what the indicators are. How do I, as an employee, get measured on my opportunity to get that profit share? This will make you cringe. Not productivity, not customer service. Anyone want to take a guess? Nope, that's another good one. Nope.
Attendance?
Thank you. Attendance. I said, okay, right? And so we're now walking the floor, and this is bugging me. And I said, okay, well, what percentage of your people get profit share? He says about 98%. Wow, okay, well, I guess it's working. People are showing up for work. I said, so 98% of your people, on average, are at work every day on time. Well,
They're at work, period.
her daughter was sick the other day. I can't gig her for that. She had a flat tire on the way to work. I'm not going to gig her for that. I mean, okay, so wait a minute here. You're not making any money. You're still making payouts, and you're making payouts to people that didn't even meet the so-called qualifications. And you're asking me why you're losing money. Okay, let's start with that right there, okay? Is management demonstrating the proper behaviors to support the strategy? Okay? So that was the first thing we had to tackle. We had to turn that profit share faucet off. And I mean, it was a fight. I thought they were ready to lynch me. There was 3 brothers and a mom, and they were not happy. I'm like, guys, they thought there was going to be mutiny on the floor. Like, no more mutiny than what's in here right now. So it was interesting, to say the least. Okay. So we know what the employees need. They need the communication. We know management has to be able to walk the talk. Now we got to blend the two together. Okay? And so here we do this by creating that sort of engaged trust in the workforce. So, and again, I apologize for preaching the choir here, but you guys know that if employees trust their supervisors, they'll open up, right? They'll be willing to offer suggestions, willing to offer ideas. They're willing to talk about the problems that are on the work floor. We need to get to this point with our people. This is hard. If you're in a union workshop, this could be a difficult one because there's always that little bit of an inherent us versus them mentality. Okay, it can be done. It definitely can be done. I've seen it. It just makes it a little bit harder for you. Okay? But we've got to get to that point because the communications that are coming out, the employees have to trust. And they've got to believe that this is exactly what they need to hear, what they want to hear, and that it's accurate, it's truthful. If the employees don't believe that, we can't get any further in this process. Okay? So, employees are going to look at this point, if they're going to trust management, they're going to look for processes that support that trust. So, it was, and I'll go back in it because it won't happen at UPS now, but, when I was there on the docks 30 years ago, it was not unseen for a supervisor to get on a conveyor belt and walk on the conveyor belt shouting instructions, okay? And they did that, why? Because they could get from one end of the warehouse to the other really fast. It's kind of like the people mover in the airport, right? Okay? Now, just a hair unsafe, wouldn't you say, being on a moving conveyor belt, okay? If an employee got on a moving conveyor belt, we got disciplined. Disconnect, right? So on one hand, do as I say, not as I do, right? That's a problem. So employees, in order to create that trust at this stage, they're going to look for the processes. Do the processes support what management's saying? So if you have a customer call center, let's say, and you're saying we're all about the customer and we need to take care of the customer, and meanwhile one of the measurements you're putting on these people is how fast they get off the phone with the customer, that's a process that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? So this step takes a long time, guys. This is one where we start finding all the inefficiencies in our processes, the things that don't make sense that we're doing just because they've always been done that way and no one ever really questioned it. So sometimes this can take the longest, but it's probably one of the most important pieces that we get right because it's what's really going to build the trust of our employees. Okay, and then measuring success. What does that really mean? Is it the Ed made his 100 widgets today, so he was a success? Is it Lisa who took 50 customer calls and resolved them all today? I mean, what is that measure of success? And how does that translate back to that strategy? So this is where we get into the performance management piece. What are we measuring our people on? Well, they show good teamwork, and they have good attendance, and they make good sound decisions, and all these things. I'm not saying those things are bad, but think about what you're rating your people on from a performance management standpoint. Does it have anything to do with where the company's going? What its strategy is? I'm working with an organization right now that manufactures high-end hair systems. Okay, they're not wigs, they're not toupees, they are hair systems. All right. Who do you think their most important people are?
Bald people?
No, that's the customers. Yeah, okay. In-house, who do you think the most important employees are? What?
The designers of the products.
Nope.
The healthcare, the shipping,
Nope.
color, research and development.
They're hairstylists. The people who are on the phone, and local people can actually come to the facility to get fitted and everything, but they hire literally the best of the best from beauty schools. Okay? And so these folks, instead of cutting hair at your local barbershop, they are working with customers to make sure they get the proper fit, the proper look, the proper style. So they are much more highly compensated than what, if you did a market study on your jobs, you'd say, oh, they're making $15 an hour. No, not this company, they're not. But then they're the best of the best. Okay? And so one of the things when we look at clear outcomes, they know there's that link, that's one of the most critical positions in that organization. Not that some of the things you guys mentioned aren't, because they are. But that position is absolutely critical to the success of this organization. Okay. And so here we have to, if management is responsible for a lot of this stuff, then management has to be held accountable for it. Again, this is not an HR project. So management has to have on their performance appraisal, hey, you guys got to walk the talk here, and here are the methods we're going to use to hold you accountable to walk that talk. So 4 steps, maybe not quite so easy, right? Compared to some of the stuff that we do that's only 4 steps. But let's talk now about kind of how we get into the measuring of the success, how we define the incentive packages, that sort of thing. One of the things that I don't want you to do is Jelly of the Month Club. Okay? If you're going to do this, you need to commit to it. Again, it goes back to that trust factor. If your organization has a history of, oh, this was the greatest whiz-bang thing, and we're going to go do this, and 6 months later everyone's forgotten about it, okay, you're going to have to deal with trust issues amongst the employees. So you have to make sure that management is committed to the fact that this is a long-term process. You're not going to see results in 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. You're probably looking at 12, 18, maybe 24 months out till you get everything in place and you start to see the results. Just like any other strategic related initiative, you don't get results overnight, right? So no flavor of the month. So let's talk about once we get the line of sight. I mean, this is a lot of communication going out, right? People get it. They're bought in. I see the mission. I see the strategy. I know how I'm tied in. Now we got to keep them fired up. Lots of different ways to do that, okay? We're just going to talk about incentive stuff today, just because of time. So the biggest question is, do you even know what motivates your people? What's going to keep them fired up day after day? If not, we better ask them, right? So if you think about our relationship with our employees, it comes down to these 2 things, okay? Employees want rewards that they value. So whether that's their compensation or a benefit package or the perks, whatever that is, okay? And hopefully you've done your research on that and you're offering a nice package to your people. What we expect from them is their time, talent, efforts, and to give us some results. So it's real simple, right? There's HR 101. Real simple. We provide a nice thing, they do good things, everyone's happy. If only it were that easy, right? So, but that's the start of it, okay? Who's responsible when this happens? Bottom says, if you are not fired with enthusiasm, you will be fired with enthusiasm. Whose fault is this guy? Thank you, management. I was giving this chat to a group of business owners, and one guy was real upset. He goes, I'd fire that guy right away. I said, I agree. I said, but whose fault that he's laying on the table? I hire self-starters, and if he's not a self-starter, this guy was just going on and on. I said, wait a minute. Who hired this guy? Well, I did. Okay, so are you saying you made a hiring mistake? Excuse me. He says, well, he's got to be a self-starter. I said, wait a minute. At time of hire, you thought he was self-motivated. You thought he was fired with enthusiasm. Now his head's on the table, okay? You have to take some ownership of that. We all do, right? We're all not perfect. You've all made bad hires. I've made bad hires in my time. It happens, okay? Once they're in there, doesn't matter how much enthusiasm they had when they walked through the door day one, did we crush it? And why did we crush it? Okay? So, here's a couple other scary stats. We know about 51% of the workforce is not engaged, and that's a very conservative number. I've seen it as high as 70-some%. You guys have seen the numbers, right? This one's interesting. 34% of employees say they want to leave their job in the next couple months. Okay, again, probably not a surprise. You guys have probably seen these numbers, okay? But this one, 59% would leave their profession if they could. Think about that for their profession, not their job. That means over half of us would get the heck out of HR as soon as the opportunity allowed, right? Okay? Think about that in terms of your workforce. Not just in terms of the top line there of your workforce not being engaged, but 59% of your people would leave their profession if they could. That's kind of scary, especially if you're in a high-tech kind of environment. Okay, take a look at this list. This list represents some of the key things that we typically use to retain and motivate our employees. I want you to look at this list, write down the top 3 that you think your employees would say are important to them. The top 3 that you think your employees would say were important to them. And those top 3 don't have to be in any particular order. Just pick the 3 you think are most important to your employees. We good? Okay. So this was a study that was actually done, and these were the results. Okay, the study went to 300 organizations, asked management, what is most important to your people on this list? And this is what management at those organizations said. How many of you had at least one of the top 3 on this list? Oh, cool. Keep your hands up. Had at least 2 of those. Had all 3. Pulled the trifecta off. 1? 1 person. Excellent. Excellent. Okay? Here's the problem. Same companies. Here's what the employees said. Now, what do you notice about this list? It's almost exact opposite, right? Okay? Certainly the top 3 are not the same. Now, I've used this slide, and I've had HR people yell at me about this. I've always heard it's the supervisor, it's the management climate, and you're telling my people aren't motivated by confidence. People are up in arms. Okay? What's the message here? Yeah, there's a disconnect in communication, right? I don't care whether you agree with this particular study or not. It's just one study, right? Okay? But what it illustrates is that, wow, there is a monster disconnect in the organizations that participate in this study between what management believes is important to people and what people say is important to people. Okay? And sure, this list will change based on, are we in a recession? Are we booming? What industry are you in? What part of your business cycle are you in? I mean, there's all kinds of things that can influence this, right? But the real message is, we better ask our people what's important to them. Because we could offer them the Cadillac of healthcare plans, but if they're more interested in give me money in my paycheck, we've got a disconnect. I remember years ago, I was working with an accounting firm, and they were having trouble recruiting new accountants out of college. And one of the things that some of the other accounting firms were doing back then was offering smartphones to all their new accountants. And this organization did not do that. And they were hearing that from candidates, oh, well, so-and-so's giving me a smartphone. Okay? Now, this is going back a few years, obviously. But they would argue, well, wait a minute, our pay is higher. You can go get your cell phone, your smartphone, pay for it and everything, and you'll still have more money in your pocket. But these young college graduates weren't hearing that. They wanted the cell phone to be handed to them. Okay? Now, I don't see that as a perk. Maybe many of you don't see that as a perk either, right? I'd rather not have the smartphone. But the reality is, it didn't matter. I had to convince these folks, if you want to resolve your recruiting crisis, then you've got to take a hard look. Maybe you pay your people less. If these kids coming in are willing to take less to give them a cell phone, give them the doggone cell phone, you know? It's crazy. So sometimes we're our own worst enemy. We got to really think hard about this, okay? Now, this scares the heck out of me. It should scare the heck out of you, okay? 11 different studies done on what changes employee behavior when it comes to pay raises. And they all came back to the same thing, that if you don't give someone at least a 7% pay increase, you will not get any change in behavior out of that person. When's the last time you gave 7% pay increases? Aside from maybe a promotion, right? Like never, okay? This is scary. So if we sit back, now I'm not advocating we don't give pay raises to people. I'm just saying, and I'm not saying you should give 7% either, right? But we got to think about that. If we're sitting back relying on the fact that our performance management program, and hopefully it's tied to your comp, and that's going to drive all of our people, oh, thank you for your hard work, here's 2%. Come on, really? I can get pepperoni on my pizza with that 2%, right? I mean, seriously, think about that. I'm a simple guy. Let's think in terms of very simple round numbers. I'm making $50,000 a year, and you give me a 2% raise. How much is my raise? How much? $1,000, right? Now, I get paid bi-weekly. So what's 1,000 divided by 26? I don't know. Right? Okay? And now, wait a minute. I'm not getting the full 1,000 because Uncle Sam's getting his chunk. I mean, literally, it's pepperoni on your pizza. Is what it comes down to. Okay? Now, again, I'm not saying that, I'm not advocating that you stop giving pay raises. But I want you to think about it in those terms for a minute. Okay? Till you do all of that math and you crunch all that, it's like, wow, it really isn't a whole lot of money. No wonder we're not getting increased effort and focus from our people. It shouldn't be a surprise at that point. Okay? There's hope, though. There is hope. What we seem to see is bonuses seem to have more of an impact. Now, take that same $1,000, okay? Instead of giving it to me out over 26 weeks, you hand me the check. Now, I'm still not getting the $1,000 because Uncle Sam's getting his share, right? So I'm walking with, we'll call it $650-ish, right? I got a check for $650 in my pocket. I can do some pretty cool stuff with that. Take a nice little vacation with my family for a long weekend. Probably get a half-decent flat-screen TV. I mean, there's things I could do with that $650. And the whole time I'm on my weekend cruise, or every time I put the football game on the flat screen, I'm like, that's my company bonus right there. Okay? There's almost that constant reminder of it. So again, I'm not saying do away with pay raises and go to bonuses. I'm just saying sometimes we got to think a little bit differently about how we're incenting our people monetarily. Okay? I just want you to think about that in terms of what might work in your organization. Okay? So, if we look at variable pay, how many of you currently tie an employee's pay raise, their merit increase, to their performance appraisal? Direct tie. Wow, only maybe half of you. Okay? So, is it safe to assume the other half, everyone gets 2%, 3%, whatever, across the board? Boom. Okay? Problems with that?
Sure.
What are the problems? Yeah, no motivation, right? I work harder than she does. She's getting the same pay raise. I mean, you guys have heard all that, right? But it's easier for the organization to just give out 3% to everybody, right? And we think that that's, quote, being fair. It's not. It's not being fair. It is one of the biggest demotivating things we can do, is give everyone the same pay raise across the board. Because the people who work really hard start to question why they should work so hard, because they're not getting any more of a raise. And the slackers are going, hey, cool, I can slack off, still get a raise. There is literally no benefit to doing that. How many of you rely solely on, and I hate this word, cost of living increases? Oh, that's even worse, right? Okay? I hate cost of living increases. Hate it, okay? So ultimately, if we're going to incent our people, whether it's through pay, benefits, time off, whatever we're looking at as an incentive package, we have to make sure that the ultimate goal is to improve performance. Otherwise, why are we spending the money? Why are we giving people increases if we're not getting anything more out of them? It doesn't really make any logical sense, does it? So we can look at, variable pay can do a lot of these things for us. And I love the analogy in pro sports. You hit more home runs, you get paid more. You get more sacks, you get paid more. You throw more touchdowns, you get paid more, right? Almost a direct link between performance and pay in the sporting world. Makes sense. Why would I pay a guy $5 million to strike out half of his at-bats? Doesn't make any sense. Okay? Paying you to get hits. So I like to think about that in terms of, well, why aren't we the same way in business? Why don't we reward our top performers really well? Why don't we hold our poor performers more accountable? And there are a lot of cultural issues there. I mean, we could talk about this all day, right? There's a lot of things, there's a lot of dynamics going on here, okay? So think about this in terms of creating a variable pay system, okay? These are not hard and fast percentages. I just threw them up here for discussion purposes. But generally, your C-suite, from a variable pay standpoint, any bonuses they get should be based 100% on whether the company's successful. And it disgusts me when you see these companies that are failing and they get rid of their CEO and there goes $10 million. Shoom, hey, I'll sign up for that job, right? I'll show up, I'll do some work for a couple of years, fail, and give me $10 million. Nice, right? Okay? But, at that level, that's how we should be rewarding our executives. Okay? Now, middle management's where it gets trickier. So middle management, they're carrying the company banner, but they also got to take care of our frontline employees. So any variable pay, any performance pay should be based a little bit on hitting company goals, because they don't have full control over all the company's goals, but also on the success of their team, whether their team achieves or not. So think about it this way. Let's just say you went 50-50 on that. Company hits its goals, but your team, Becky, does not. What kind of pay or what kind of bonus would you get? 50%. 50%, right. Is that fair? Yeah. Her team didn't achieve its goal. She shouldn't get that piece of the pie. But as a management team member, she contributed to the overall whole. She should get part of that. Okay? Now, our employees still should be partly aligned with the company. Okay? Now, here's where it gets trickier. I'm an employee. I make my widgets every day. I hit my goals every day. I've nailed my individual effort. Company's not profitable. How much increase should I get? No.
No, not profitable, sorry,
None. None. Company's not profitable. I shouldn't get anything. Okay? Now that's harsh. Okay? It's harsh. But I want you to think about this for a minute. Go back to my cabinet manufacturer. What behaviors are we incenting? Okay? So if we have an employee, I'm not saying you never do it. I'm saying you have to be very, very careful. Okay? So those of you who went, be very careful. Okay? If I went over and above and something happened and the company was not successful, maybe we can play with that a little bit. Okay? Maybe. But we got to take that on a case-by-case basis. If we blanket across and say, oh, hey, yeah, company wasn't profitable, but you hit your individual goals, you hit your... Well, where's that money coming from if we weren't profitable? Okay? When you think about it, where is the money coming from? So we've got to really think hard about that. Okay? Now, ultimately, this has to come back to the employee's contribution. There has to be a link. When I get that bonus check, I get that pay raise, I've got to be able to say, hey, there was that line of sight they created in me. I know what I did today contributed to the company getting the goals, and that money in my hand right now correlates to that. That's the culmination of what we've done, right? We've connected all those dots so that, every Friday the employee's grabbing that paycheck saying, I get it. Or every quarter, annually, the bonus, right? I get it. I always think about Clark Griswold at Christmas, right? when he got his Jelly of the Month Club membership. And he thought he was getting the monster bonus and putting the pool in, okay? So does the incentive reflect the level of contribution of the employee? You have an employee that just saved you $1 million with some great idea. Here's a $100 gift card. Take your family out. Really? Okay? So again, punishment fits the crime. Reward should fit the incentive. Okay?
Another big misconception in leadership in the C-suite is that saving money versus making money.
I just got a call the other day from an organization who wants to put in an incentive package. And we talked, and they got down to the invariable, well, what would this cost? I told them, oh, we only wanted to spend like $2,000. I said, okay, so wait a minute. If I do my job with you, you're going to make tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars more because you're incenting your people properly and rewarding them for work. It comes back to that, right? So how do we get management to thinking about, you know, instead of upfront costs with something like this, where's the cost benefit on the back side, right? And that's the age-old return on investment argument that we have to make as HR people. When we go with well, yeah, boss, we're going to spend this, but here are the projections. And so in order to do that, in order to make that sale, who has to be your best buddy?
CFO.
Thank you, your CFO. Probably also your arch nemesis at times, but you've got to be attached at the hip with that person, okay? Because they're going to be able to run the financial modeling for you, okay? Okay. So here's the dark side. If we do this improperly, we create havoc. Let's go back to the mortgage industry crisis of 10 years ago, right? Why did the mortgage industry collapse?
Giving out a lot of bad loans.
Giving out loans. You make minimum wage, you want a $500,000 house? Sold, right? Yeah. Okay. Why were the loan reps doing that?
They were incentivized.
Incentivized, right? Short-term line of sight. There's the problem. I'm going to give out loans to everybody because I'm lining my pockets. Okay? That's the real dark side here. We've got to really, really be careful that the behaviors we are incenting are the ones that are going to drive long-term performance for our organization. Okay?
Can that be the same example for Wells Fargo?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay? So ultimately, what we have to do is remember, creating line of sight and sending those behaviors is all about the long-term benefits to the organization. Okay? And that's where, again, the financial modeling has to come in. We've got to take that to our finance department and say, okay, if we do this, let's look at best case scenarios, worst case scenarios. Okay? Finally, the ultimate goal is, how do we create the right mix? What is the right mix for our organization between offering a great benefits package, great training and development opportunities, great pay, great bonuses? You know, how do we blend all that together? Well, we know there's no silver bullet, right? It's different for each one of you. You just have to figure out what that is by talking to your people, finding out what's important to them and putting the best thing you can together based on where the company's headed. Okay? Not everything has to be the Cadillac model. Some of it can just be a good old sedan. If that's what your people want, need, value the most, great. I had one last quick story. I had an organization that, up home, I'm from Pennsylvania, Hershey Park in Central PA, one of the big places a lot of companies take their people for employee gatherings. And this company would do that. They'd get about 30% of the employees there. And half of those 30% were complaining that, oh, well, you send me for free, but I got to pay for my family. I got to pay $5 to get my family in. And mind you, just getting into a theme park and food and all this stuff all day, I got to spend $5. Okay. So 30% of the people going, cost them $40,000 a year to do this. This was a large organization, okay? I spent $40,000 to engage 30% of my people, and half of that 30% are unhappy. They got to help contribute. Meanwhile, same organization, give every employee a gift certificate to go across the street to the best bake shop you could ever want to get a birthday cake every year. Now, they could have that birthday cake designed any way they wanted, any flavors, any icing styles, anything written on there. Cost $10 an employee, 98% redemption rate. Cost them $10,000 a year. Hello? What are your people telling you? And when I talk to them about this, I thought, oh my gosh, again, they're going to run me out of town because we can't stop the company picnic. We've always done the company picnic. Come on, really? Okay? So we got to make sure that we're tying everything together. Okay? People see their achievements, everything connects. All right. Bottom line, whatever you do here comes back to that final phrase. Does this help us recruit, engage, and retain key talent? We know we're not going to please everybody in anything we do in HR, right? So all of our decisions should be made on our key talent, the people we value most and are most important to the organization's success. If we keep them happy, we're doing our job. Okay. Final thought, you can see it up there. Don't ignore the dark side. Think about these principles.